I walked into the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of cheap aerosol air freshener and stale grease. Crystal was standing by the sink, one hand on her hip, the other holding my son's refurbished tablet over a basin of soapy water. Gavin was at her feet, reaching up, his face twisted in silent panic. "This thing is ruining my vibe," Crystal said. Her voice was flat, bored. "I'm trying to film and all I hear is cartoons." She didn't wait for me to speak. She didn't wait for me to move. She just opened her hand. The tablet hit the water with a dull, heavy splash. It didn't sink immediately. It floated for a second, screen up, the bright colors of Gavin's drawing app flickering once before going dark. Then it tilted and slipped beneath the gray foam. That tablet cost $280. It wasn't just a piece of electronics. It was 6 months of Gavin skipping ice cream. It was overtime shifts in a freezer that left my hands cracked and bleeding. It was the only thing he owned that was truly his. "There," Crystal said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Now maybe we can have some quiet." She turned back to her ring light, adjusting her hair in the reflection of her phone. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Gavin. She just dismissed us like we were clutter she'd finally cleared away. The sound of that splash kept replaying in my head. It was quieter than a scream, but it ended everything. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just watched the bubbles rise from the screen my son starved himself to save for. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't reach for the towel. I didn't reach for Crystal's hair. I reached into the water. My hand broke the surface of the gray foam, the grease coating my skin like a second layer of sweat. I found the hard edge of the tablet and pulled it out. Water streamed from the charging port, dark and smelling of bacon fat. I held it there for a second, letting it drip onto the linoleum floor. Crystal laughed. It was a short, sharp sound designed to get a reaction. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to throw a fit so she could turn her camera on and tell her followers about her crazy, ungrateful sister. She wanted content. I denied her the footage. In that moment, the part of my brain that manages the night shift at the warehouse took over. When a pallet collapses or a freezer unit fails at 3 a.m, you don't cry. You assess the damage, you secure the perimeter, and you execute the solution. I walked past her. I walked past the ring light and the tripod and the piles of cheap clothes she hadn't bothered to wash. I went straight to the living room where my parents, Ronald and Brenda, were sitting on the couch. Dad was staring at the television, the volume turned up loud enough to drown out the world. Mom was scrolling on her phone, her thumb moving in a rhythmic, hypnotic swipe. Neither of them looked up. They had heard the splash. They had heard Gavin crying. They had heard Crystal's cruel laugh. They chose the screen. I walked past them too. I went into the room Gavin and I shared, the one with the peeling wallpaper and the mattress on the floor because Crystal needed the guest room for her studio. "Pack your bag, Gavin," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, low-level metallic. Gavin looked up, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Are we going to Grandma's?" "No," I said. "We're leaving. Put your shoes on." I grabbed the duffel bag from under the bed. I didn't pack everything. I packed the essentials. Uniforms. School clothes. Toothbrushes. The few toys that Crystal hadn't managed to break or sell yet. I moved with a mechanical precision, folding, stacking, zipping. Crystal appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a glass of wine in her hand. "Oh, don't be such a sullen cow, Cheyenne," she said, taking a sip. "You're always so dramatic. It's just a screen. I did you a favor. He should be reading books anyway. You're raising him to be a zombie." I zipped the bag shut. The sound was loud in the small room. I stood up and slung the strap over my shoulder. I took Gavin's hand. "Where are you going?" Crystal asked, her voice pitching up slightly. "You haven't done the dishes. Mom said you were making dinner." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the desperate need for attention in her eyes, the way she posed even when no camera was on her. I saw a 36-year-old woman who had never been told no in her entire life. "Cheyenne," she snapped. "I'm talking to you." I walked through her. I used my shoulder to check her against the doorframe, not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to make her spill her wine. "Hey," she shrieked. "Watch it." I walked through the living room. Mom looked up then, finally sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. "Cheyenne," she asked, her voice vague. "Where are you going with that bag?" I didn't answer. I opened the front door. The heat from outside hit me, heavy and humid, smelling of asphalt and exhaust. It smelled like freedom. "Cheyenne, get back here." Crystal yelled from the hallway. "You can't just leave. Who's going to clean up this mess?" I stepped out onto the porch. I ushered Gavin to the car, buckling him into his booster seat. I threw the bag in the passenger seat. I placed the dripping, ruined tablet on the dashboard. I got in. I locked the doors. I started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw them. Crystal was in the window, mouth open, shouting something I couldn't hear. Mom was standing behind her, looking confused, waiting for someone to tell her what to feel. Dad hadn't even turned his head from the TV. I put the car in drive and didn't look back. The vibration of the steering wheel against my palms was the only thing keeping me grounded. I drove until the suburban sprawl turned into the flickering neon of the highway exit strip. $280. To Crystal, that amount was a pair of knockoff sneakers or a bar tab she'd stick someone else with. To me, it was math. It was $14 an hour. It was 20 hours of overtime in the deep freeze, where the air is so cold it feels like inhaling broken glass. I looked at the tablet sitting on the dashboard. The screen was black, the casing still slick with soap. That tablet was 6 months of saying no to Gavin when the ice cream truck came by. It was 6 months of skipping my own lunch so I could put $5 in the jar hidden behind the cereal box. It was the only thing I had ever bought him that was brand new, not a hand-me-down, not a thrift store find. It was his ticket to a world where he could draw and create and escape the shouting match that was our daily life. And Crystal had drowned it because she wanted quiet. We checked into the Motel 6 off the interstate. It wasn't luxury, but it had a locking door and no one screaming my name. Gavin sat on the bed, quietly coloring on the back of a receipt with a pen I found in my purse. He was so used to making himself small. I sat in the plastic chair by the window and pulled out my phone. My notifications were already stacking up. Not apologies. Not concerns for where we were sleeping. It was a notification that Crystal was live. I clicked the link. There she was, bathed in the artificial glow of her ring light. She had changed her shirt and reapplied her lip gloss. She was holding a glass of wine, a fresh one, and looking sadly into the camera. It's just really hard, she was saying, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. When you're trying to build an empire, trying to elevate your family, and you have people around you who are just toxic. My sister literally stormed out today because I asked for a little professional courtesy while I was filming. She dragged my nephew out into the night just to make a scene. It's jealousy, guys. It's pure jealousy. Comments were rolling in. Stay strong, queen. Haters gonna hate. You don't need that negative energy. I watched her face. I really watched it. For years, I had looked at Crystal and seen confidence. I had seen someone who felt entitled to the world because she truly believed she was better than us. I had felt small in her shadow. But tonight, sitting in a cheap motel room with clarity cold in my chest, I saw something else. I saw the desperate way she checked her reflection every 3 seconds. I saw the way she clutched that wine glass like a lifeline. It wasn't confidence. It was compensation. Crystal didn't have a job. She didn't have a car in her own name. She didn't have a single asset to call her own. Her entire persona was a costume stitched together from lies and my parents' credit. This is the delusion of the empty wallet. When you have no value of your own, no skills, no discipline, no achievements, you have to destroy the value of others to feel significant. She didn't break the tablet because it was loud. She broke it because it was real. It was something earned. It was a tangible proof of work and love, 2 things she was incapable of producing. She was a parasite convincing the host that it was an honor to be bled. I closed the app. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger implies you expect better. I felt clinical. I felt the way I feel when I look at a pallet of expired inventory that needs to be written off. Crystal wasn't a sister. She was a liability. And it was time to audit the books. I didn't leave a comment on Crystal's video. I didn't text mom back. I didn't engage in the public theater they were so desperate to drag me into. Instead, I opened my laptop. The motel Wi-Fi was slow, buffering the connection like it was thinking about quitting, but I was patient. I had spent years managing inventory logs and tracking shipments. I knew how to look at a mess of numbers and find the story hidden inside them. If Crystal was a liability, I needed to know the extent of the exposure. I started with myself. I logged into the credit bureau, my fingers flying across the keys. There was a knot of anxiety in my stomach, a cold, hard stone of fear. I had lived in that house. My mail went to that house. My social security card was in a firebox in the hall closet. The page loaded. 780. Excellent. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My credit was clean. Crystal hadn't touched me. Maybe she knew I checked it religiously. Maybe she knew I'd press charges without hesitation. Or maybe she just knew I didn't have enough to steal. But someone was paying for the wine. Someone was paying for the ring lights and the clothes and the branding trips. I thought about the kitchen table back at the house. It was always covered in clutter, flyers, coupons, magazines. But lately the pile had changed. I had seen envelopes with red stamps. I had seen window envelopes from banks I didn't recognize. Whenever I walked in, Dad would shuffle them under a newspaper, his hand shaking, his eyes darting away. I opened a new tab. I navigated to the county recorder's public access portal. Information is public if you know where to look. Property taxes, liens, deeds. It's all there waiting in the digital archives for someone who cares enough to look. I typed in my father's address. The house I grew up in. The house Dad had paid off 15 years ago. The house he said was his legacy, the only thing he had to leave us. The search results populated. I scrolled past the original deed from 1988. I scrolled past the release of the mortgage from 2005. And then I stopped. There, dated 2 years ago, was a new entry. A lien. I clicked the document. It was a PDF scanned in low resolution, but the numbers were clear enough. It wasn't a small loan. It wasn't a repair loan. It was a home equity line of credit. A HELOC. The amount made the room spin. $195,000. I stared at the screen. That was nearly the entire value of the house. That was every cent of equity my father had built over 40 years of factory shifts and skipped vacations. I looked at the date again. 2 years ago. That was right around the time Crystal moved back in. Right around the time she started her consulting firm. Right around the time Mom started telling me they couldn't afford to fix the air conditioning. I dug deeper. I checked the property tax records. Delinquent. I checked the status of the HELOC provider. It was a predatory lender, the kind that advertises on daytime TV with smiling seniors and fine print that bleeds you dry. This wasn't just bad money management. This was an extraction. I sat in a creaky motel chair, the blue glow of my laptop lighting the room while Gavin slept beside me. I thought I had escaped emotional abuse. But staring at the numbers, I realized this wasn't just cruelty, it was a crime. And I was the only one who had seen it. I returned to the house the next morning, telling myself I was there for Gavin's clothes. I was really there for proof. The house was suffocating. Crystal sat amid shipping boxes complaining about vendors. Mom was at the stove, cold and defensive. I ignored them and went straight to the mail pile Dad always hid. There was a notice of sale from the county sheriff. Foreclosure. 6 weeks. Dad barely reacted. Crystal dismissed it as a mistake. I confronted her with the records. A $195,000 HELOC taken out on the house. Dad hadn't signed it. He hadn't even known how. Crystal admitted she'd handled the paperwork. She'd forged his signature, used his social security number, and spent the money on her fake business. When I called it identity theft, Mom exploded, then confessed she'd given Crystal the information herself. She had sacrificed Dad to protect Crystal's fantasy. When Crystal demanded I take out a loan to fix it, I refused and said I was pressing charges. That's when Dad laughed. He told us the truth. 5 years earlier he had taken out a reverse mortgage. The bank already owned the house. The equity was gone. Crystal had stolen debt, not value. Then he showed me where the money went. Every payment had been saved in a $529 education fund for Gavin. $285,000. Irrevocable. Untouchable. Crystal collapsed. Her safety net was gone. Her crime was pointless. Dad stood, said he was done, and walked out. I took Gavin and followed. As we drove away, the house shrank behind us. The air felt lighter. For the first time, no one was draining us. I used to think leaving would hurt. That I'd feel guilt or loss. Instead, I felt free. Walking away isn't quitting. It's survival. You're not a bank for someone else's delusions. Family isn't blood. It's protection. If you're holding a rope that's burning your hands, let go.